There's a frog. It's a metaphor. Thrown in boiling water. It jumps out immediately. But be cool. Maybe put it in some temperate waters and slowly raise the heat. This same frog will boil to death, not even realizing its circumstance. Now, for the past 3 years, ever since his narrow, very cool, and admittedly democratic victory, President William Ruto has been slowly turning up the heat on ordinary Kenyans across his country. They're jumping out of the pot now, and he doesn't know how to handle it. Once just the picture of an ordinary hustler, this man has become, I guess, an extraordinary hustler. Y'all should know your words better. Anyway, it's June 9th, 2025. A teacher, a budding young political commentator, is arrested for allegedly impugning the character of the Inspector General of the Kenyan Police. So what's his crime? Essentially, it's critiquing the government and leadership on social media. Albert Ojwang was his name, and he was then killed in police custody. The following is how the official state statement rang, and I mean this as in I'm quoting here. While in custody, the suspect sustained head injuries after hitting his head against the cell wall. Police officers on duty promptly noticed the injuries and rushed him to hospital, where he was pronounced dead on arrival. I can't even call that a cover-up, it's so lazy. But can't you just imagine how this made millions of Kenyans feel? Well, that's why they took to the streets on the 17th of June to demand justice. Now, by the 25th of June, it was again the 25th of June, which has now become something of a landmark anniversary in Kenya, following the protests of last year. We'll get to that in a minute. But once again, the streets of Nairobi were a thick fog of tear gas. As protesters flooded the streets, police officers opened fire, gas, water cannons, rubber projectiles, live ammunition. By nightfall, 31 people had died. Over 100 were injured. More than 500 were arrested. Kenya, say it with me now. It's time for a revolution. Now, Kenya should be Africa's success story, but if Africa was a family, Kenya's like that cool uncle that made it rich. He's great at parties, but he clearly has some of his own shit to still sort through. So this is a country of 58 million people. It produces about 26% of all the economic output of East Africa. From its snow-capped peaks of Mount Kenya, after which the place is named, to the wildebeest migrations and Mufasa killers of Masai Mara. From the tech innovations of Silicon Savannah to the global dominance of their Kenyan distance runners.
Abnormally fast! They'll run as fast as Kenyans! People will watch them running and think they're Kenyans! They'll race as fast as Kenyans against actual Kenyans, and it'll be a tie and they'll get deported back to Kenya!
This nation actually really does have a lot going for it though, especially within an African frame of reference. But let's scratch beneath that shiny surface and we'll find a harsh reality. About 73% of their population, 73% of their population is below the age of 30. That makes Kenyan demographics some of the youngest in the world. But university graduates are driving motorcycle taxis for a living. Engineers are selling second-hand clothes. Doctors are immigrating to Gulf states or literally killing themselves. I'm not joking. The median age is just 20 years old. Take that in, a 20-year-old median age. But these young people inherited a country drowning in debt of over 10 million shillings about. That's roughly 75 billion USD. Every year, more of Kenya's budget is going towards servicing this debt problem, instead of building the future that these young people are entitled to, that they were promised. Roads remain potholed. Hospitals lack medicine, schools need teachers, but somehow there's always no money except for government officials, luxury vehicles, and expensive foreign trips. By 2024, the food prices had literally doubled in 3 years. Can you imagine that? Electricity tariffs rose without warning. Job creation couldn't keep up with the population growth. making each graduation season feel like a cliff dive into poverty and depression, generationally caused unemployment. This is the Kenya that Gen Z inherited, and by June of last year, 2024, they'd had enough, right about the time when this thing came along. Finance Bill of 2024. Under pressure from the IMF to reduce their budget deficit, they decided that, you know what's the best way? Probably tax practically everything Kenyans use every day and rely on for, literally day-to-day living. We're talking taxes on bread, the staple food like in many countries, on diapers, on sanitary pads, effectively taxing women for their biological function and being, and parents for being parents. This is in addition to a whopping 16% VAT increase. That's the tax that you have on your usual goods and that you literally pay basically on every single sale. This bill would have made successful living an imagined unreachable future for any Kenyan that's not in government, and it would make basic survival an expensive luxury if we're thinking from our eyes. This in a country where already millions are struggling to eat. But here's what really ignited the fury. While these people were imposing crushing taxes on ordinary Kenyans, the same government was living lavishly. This is the Ruto administration that ran and won on being an everyday man. Someone who said he will bring economic prosperity to the youth, to the working class. Now he had been marked with expensive trips, luxury vehicles for officials, and frankly tone-deaf displays of wealth, while the people couldn't afford their next meal. The symbolism is devastating. A government telling their people to tighten their belt while they're literally loosening their own considerably. Food's like man, Wantam. But that's when something unprecedented happened, something that should inspire young Africans across our continent. Instead of waiting for the old opposition politicians to organize and contaminate their protests, young Kenyans took to social media. TikTok videos were explaining the bill in depth to the ordinary citizen. They went viral. Twitter threads broke down exactly how much each household would pay extra. Instagram stories were starting to call on mass action. This wasn't politics as usual. This was civic education meets digital activism meets mass uprising. Can you imagine the first ever coup d'etat? Okay, that's the last one, I promise. To be fair, I am a dad, so... Unfortunately, what happened next shook Kenya to its foundations. On June 25th, last year, 2024, hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets across the country. But these weren't your typical African protests. No ethnic mobilization, no opposition leader calling for mass action, no foreign funding or interference, just good old young Kenyans from all 42 ethnic communities who looked at their government and their proposed tax increases and said collectively, Hapana, we're not doing this anymore. The protests erupted in at least 27 of Kenya's 47 counties. Kikuyu and Luo, Kalenjin and Kamba, Loya and Maasai, all united in a way that transcended the tribal politics that have defined Kenya since independence. They wore Kenyan flags as capes, they sang the national anthem both in English and in Swahili, and they were chanting Ruto must go. The government's response was swift, it was brutal. The police fired tear gas into crowds, deployed the water cannons, live ammunition for the first time. At least 60 people were killed. 361 were injured in those June protests, though a lot of activist organizations actually estimate this number to be higher. But faced with this unprecedented uprising, President Ruto did something African presidents very rarely do. He flinched. And the next day, on 26th of June, he announced that he will not be signing the finance bill. And he fired a lot of his cabinet, unfortunately, only to rehire them pretty soon. A stunning climb down from a ladder, a leader who had insisted just days before that this is like essential to the Kenyan economy and stability. During the most recent protest, police officers shot a mask vendor, Boniface Karuki, in the face, at point-blank range, and in front of a camera. The video went viral across social media and it drew condemnation from international organizations, of course. Now, these and other police officers facing similar cases are being put to the stake in some sort of effort to appease the public. But I very seriously doubt that there is anybody that does not hold President Ruto personally responsible for the chilling rise in police brutality, abductions, killings that we've been witnessing in Kenya. This is the president issuing a instruction to his police on the news.
Don't kill them, but should shoot them in the legs so they break and they can go to hospital on their way to court.
When that wasn't enough, he escalated even further, claiming that the protests are an attack on the security forces, a declaration of war against the country. So, of course, the result of the recent protests were catastrophic. Over 70 people have died in what is becoming a sick yearly tradition. But out of this bloodshed emerged perhaps the most significant political slogan in Kenya since even independence. As a linguist, I really love this one. Wantam. Now, Swahili itself is something of a combinational Pidgin language. This isn't Swahili, it's English. But appreciate the phonetic interplay and meaningful understanding that it produces. Meaning one term, Wantam, for Ruto. Protesters stick their fingers out in the air, chanting for his departure. The movement has evolved into something called Gen Zote, Gen all of them, representing a mindset that is so beautiful. It transcends age and all the old unnecessary boundaries drawn between their people that nobody ever wanted. So what makes Wantam special and revolutionary isn't just its demand for Ruto's removal, it's a rejection of Kenya's entire political system while still adhering to lawful process and constitutional values. For decades, Kenyan politics has been predictable. It's politicians making ethnic appeals, promises of development, and then they get elected, they steal public resources, and they prepare for the next election cycle based on tribal arithmetic and bribes, rather than any performance goals or achievements or progress for their people. But Wantam represents something entirely different. Politics based on accountability, delivery, and the radical idea that leaders should actually serve the people who elect them. Wait, do you mean a functional application of democracy? Something like it. But it's young Kenyans saying they refuse to accept the politics of ethnic division, corruption, and empty promises. They want to break the cycle. Of course, this terrifies political establishment across Africa. Other governments are now taking preemptive measures, restricting some social media, cracking down on civil society, increasing surveillance of young activists. They seem to be learning all of the wrong lessons from Kenya, but not to worry, because we're learning the right ones, and that's how to speak. And in our ships of relation, we shall sail against authoritarian rule. But now this is where it gets a bit more complex. Despite everything, the protests, the deaths, the international condemnation, the patheticality of William Ruto, he remains the frontrunner for Kenya's 2027 elections. Why? Because there isn't any strong oppositional leader yet who can capitalize on this resentment. Everyone else is old too. Not to mention that those old guys are offering much fewer bribes than the old guy currently in power. So Kenyans are ready to vote him out, but vote who in? In Kenya's electoral arithmetic, you don't need to win over everybody, you just need to have enough regions to secure victory. So the People's Challenge isn't so much just Ruto as it is building a political coalition that can win elections and govern, uphold the government. So if you're Kenyan, I would actually love to hear your opinion in terms of who might be a challenger to Ruto, even a dark horse. I don't know too much, but I did see that David Maraga is running, potentially, or it looks like he's running, but Also a bit old, hey? So hopefully he makes it to 2027, but he looks like a good guy. Let me know your thoughts on what you would like to see and what you think is realistic. This paradox explains why Kenya hasn't been able to force Ruto into a resignation and why he might even survive politically and long enough to run a strong campaign for 2027. I mean, how are we even discussing 27s? Are you telling me we're going to go through this at least 2 more times before we see any change? What happens in Kenya does not stay in Kenya. This is Africa, and the Africa family talks, mama. Young people are watching Kenyan Gen Z force a president to withdraw major legislation. We should all start asking, why not us? Why not here? The template has been established. We have seen that you can organize people without traditional political parties, that we can bypass ethnic gatekeeping, we can politically execute bad leaders if we come together, that we can force change through sustained digital activism, through physical street action, through raising our voices. Whether this becomes a continent-wide awakening or something that is crushed by the established order in its tracks remains to be seen. But I believe that there has been a fundamental shift here, and I don't think that it can be undone. As I write this or read this, Kenya remains trapped in a cycle of violence. Every few weeks, protesters brave police batons and bullets. We have annual tides now that ebb and flow. President Ruto has chosen to start fires in the sea so that he can claim that he's fighting fire with fire, doubling down on both his repression and his idiocy. Rather than just addressing the underlying grievances of the people, the empty promises that he put his word to. The tragedy is that many of Kenya's problems are solvable. The country has the resources, the talent, the people, definitely the talent, the institutions to provide opportunities for their young, booming population. What it lacks is leadership. Leadership that is willing to prioritize public service over personal enrichment. Leadership that cares about the people it claims to be serving. But here's what gives me hope. A generation that has been politicized cannot be unpoliticized. Young Kenyans, you have tasted the power of collective action. We have seen that governments can be forced to change their course. You have learned that you don't have to accept bad governance as something inevitable on our continent. That change is power. Even more so, that the power is in our hands, in their hands, in your hands. But I'm also sure that they have learned the cost of this power, of this responsibility. That pain rippling multitudinally across thousands of families is the true cost of struggle. The revolution may not be televised, no, but it might just be tweeted. And the clock is tick-tocking for Ruto and all other African leaders that still believe in an authoritarian ambition. And in Kenya, that's proven to be more powerful than anyone ever imagined. Asante sana. I'm pretty sure I did not pronounce any of those words correctly because I did not Google any of them. But Ruto Wantam.